Today we are reading Trick or Treat, and we are looking at this story and the narrator and comparing it to the story on page 294 of Putting It Off. We're looking at the two narrators and we're trying to decide if this story is going to be first-person point of view or third-person point of view. Remember, in first-person point of view, the narrators are the characters in the story, and they tell you about their feelings and their thoughts on what they are experiencing. When the characters are not in the story, they're looking from the outside in, they are called third-person narrators, and those clue words are she, he, they, and it might include things like that. The first title that I see is Trick or Treat, and the words to know here are current, stern, and victim. I also see there's a couple illustrations. There's an illustration of a little spider. There's an illustration of a child looking at a book. There is also, on the next page, a spider under a piece of maybe paper on a chair and a permission slip. When you turn the page to Putting It Off, you see lots of illustrations that appear to be like stickers. A heart, a soccer ball, a cat, some flowers, and a dog. I also see there's some binding on here that makes you think of a journal. So when I look at this story, Putting It Off, I'm going to think about what is the theme and what are the details that support that theme or the mood and what the narrator is thinking. Going back to our first story, we're going to be thinking about how we will compare the narration in this story to the narration of the other story. Looking at our questions here, question 1 says, which statement best describes the differences between the narrator's points of view in the two stories? The only way we can answer that is if we read both stories carefully and reread them and look for clue words. Part 2 says, underline the clues that help you determine the narrator's point of view, and it has both stories here, so it's going to be important for us to show our work and show our thinking in question number 2. Question number 3 says, this question has two parts. First, part A, then part B. Part A. Read this sentence from paragraph 11, Putting It Off. Never, never again will you catch me procrastinating before a big test. What does the word procrastinating mean as used in the sentence? Remember, when we look at this word, we're going to use the skills we learned in previous weeks of context clues. We're going to look at the words before it and the words after it and decide the meaning of that word. Part B. Underline the details in the paragraph that provide the best clue to the meaning procrastinating before the big test. Number 4. Compare how the passages are similar and how they are different. This is another skill that we've learned previously called comparing and contrasting. So you are going to put an X in the box if it tells that detail in the story. So if it includes a narrator who observes an event but does not experience it, you'll put that in Trick or Treat. If it includes dialogue of two people talking with quotations, you'll put an X next to whichever story or both. Moving on to question number 5. This will be your homework. Short response. Compare and contrast the types of narration in Trick or Treat and Putting It Off. Explain what each type reveals about the narrator's point of view. Use at least one detail from each to support your story. So we want to have one sentence for Trick or Treat point of view, one sentence for Putting It Off point of view, one detail for Trick or Treat, and one detail for Putting It Off. That's a total of at least 4 sentences in our answer. Now that we have reviewed our questions and reviewed our text features, we're going to begin reading. When I am done reading aloud, you will read quietly to yourself both stories and answer the questions independently. When you are done answering the questions, you will compare your answers with someone at your table, and then raise your hand to have your answers checked. Here we go. Please put your finger on the first word of the story. Trick or treat. Terry hid his face behind his science book so no one would see him laugh. Everyone knew that if Terry chuckled when nobody else was laughing, somebody was about to get pranked. His current target was Mr. Mason, his teacher. Terry had put a rubber spider on Mr. Mason's chair and couldn't wait to see what happened when his teacher sat down. "Good morning, class," said Mr. Mason as he breezed into the room. "Let's get started, shall we?" He added, grabbing his science book. He pulled his chair out and got ready to sit. Unable to help himself, Terry let out a squeaky snicker. Mr. Mason froze. "Terry, is there something you need to tell me?" he asked. "No, Mr. Mason," Terry answered, but the huge smile on his face told the truth. Mr. Mason leaned over and looked at the seat of his chair. There, right in the middle, was a big black spider. Mr. Mason snatched up the rubber spider and walked over to Terry's desk. "Terry, your pranks are getting tiresome," Mr. Mason said sternly. The other students nodded in agreement. At first, Terry's pranks had been funny, but nobody could remember a day when he hadn't played a prank on someone in class. "I need you to go sit in the hall for 10 minutes and think about how your victims feel about your pranks." Terry left the class and sat again. The wall in the hallway. His smile was gone, but he did actually feel sorry. Mostly, he was just disappointed that Mr. Mason had figured out his prank before he sat down. Terry really wanted to see Mr. Mason's reaction. A few minutes later, the classroom door opened. "You can come back in now, Terry," said Mr. Mason. Terry hopped up and walked back to his desk. "All right, let's get back to business," Mr. Mason continued. "Did all of you remember to bring your permission slips for the field trip to the ice cream factory tomorrow?" Terry's eyes widened. Field trip? Ice cream factory? He didn't remember ever hearing about this, but all around him the classmates were reaching into their desk and pulling out permission slips. "Mr. Mason, I don't have a permission slip!" Terry wailed. He couldn't believe he was going to miss such a great trip. "How does it feel to be pranked, Terry?" teased Mr. Mason, grinning. Terry realized there was no field trip. He heaved a sigh of relief. "It felt awful, Mr. Mason," he answered. Suddenly, Terry realized that he was getting tired of his pranks, too. All right, take about 3 minutes now. We're going to pause the video, and you need to find clue words that tells us which point of view is this. How are the characters thinking and feeling? And what do you see that describes the characters' thoughts and feelings? Would it be first person point of view or third person point of view? Go. Now we are going to read Putting It Off. We are going to make a connection between the characters in the story and what they feel and think, and how that is going to show us the point of view. Putting It Off, page 294. Putting it off. "Come sit with me so I can help you study for your tests, Serena," called Mom. I rolled my eyes because, after all, it was a whole week before the big math test, and I didn't feel like studying yet. "Mom!" I wailed. Can't I finish watching this show on the Science Channel first? It's educational, and it's absolutely fascinating. Plus, if I study now, I'll just forget everything before next week's test. Mom sighed. Go ahead and finish your program, I guess, but I won't be able to help you study after dinner. That's okay, Mom. I'll just study alone later before bedtime. She gave me a look that showed she suspected I didn't intend to study today. I wish she understood that I do my best work at the last minute. Once again, I relaxed onto the couch. Truthfully, only half of my attention was focused on the Science Channel. Peeling stickers from a sheet and positioning them artfully on the cover of my math book seemed far more interesting. And it was a lot more entertaining than studying, for sure. Once I've arranged the cover stickers, just the way I wanted, I put my notebook and stickers away and went to the kitchen to have dinner. Macaroni and cheese, my favorite. Shortly after that, it was time for bed. But naturally, I hadn't studied. Why would I, if the test was an entire week away? The next morning, I sauntered into math class, well rested and refreshed, but everyone else looked sleepy and tense. What's going on? I asked my friend Megan. Why is everyone looking so tired? I stayed up until almost 10 studying for the test, said Megan. Didn't you? Oh no, it's next week, right? I started to feel a little nervous. Serena, don't you remember? Mr. Gordon changed the day of the test from next Friday to this Friday. You didn't study at all? Megan looked at me, wide-eyed. I sank into my assigned seat. If only I'd let Mom help me study last night, I might have a chance at passing this test. Never, never again will you catch me procrastinating before a big test. Next time, I promise I won't wait until the last minute. All right, so some things to think about. As you read, look for phrases or words that are clarifying the point of view. Before you answer your questions, make sure you reread the article and make sure that you think about Terry and Trick or Treat, and you think about Serena and Putting It Off, and how are their points of view and feelings and thoughts shown in these two stories. Your homework tonight will be to answer the writing question. Remember, you must have complete sentences with at least 4 sentences.